So if you have a pencil handy, it's not a tongue twister because you won't say it, so it's a brain twister. It's a pencil twister. Yeah. And I'll refer to it, and if you don't write it down, then that just means you have to listen to the broadcast over again. But what if I told you? What if I told you that everything that you think you know is not what you know? Everything that you think you know is not what you know. I just want you to be with those words for a minute and to ponder, what does that actually mean, and what's the relevance of that for me? Everything that you think you know, because all of us in here, we think we know a lot of stuff, right? But what we think we know is really ultimately not what we know. Because ultimately what we know is this infallible, immeasurable sense of knowledge, of wisdom, of intelligence. It is the untapped resource, which is life itself, that must exist in all sentient beings. You're no exception. So it doesn't matter how much we've lived our life in resistance of that. That which you have yet to untap is still very much alive. It is the primordial seed that exists and rests within all of life. So what do we get to do with that? We get to go and explore, if we would like to become aware, to determine our ability to accept and allow that particular knowledge to come to us at our beck and call. We've talked so many times about the fact that solution, that the answer to the prayer, the answer to the proverbial questions that haunt us, that weigh us, that exist within our mind, the solution is always there. Because it is a part of that which is universal mind, that subjective part that exists within every single one of us. So it is there. It is there. So if I told you that what you think you know is not fully what you know, because we know so much more than we've ever even begun to explore. We encourage our community. This is a part of the global theme. We're supposed to encourage our communities, our members, to live courageous, fearless lives. How are you doing with that? Courageous, fearless lives, and to be passionate about its possibilities. So the courageous, fearless part, that's fine. But to be passionate about it, life, its possibilities, this is the thing that I'm really curious and fascinated about. Because to be passionate about something takes cultivation. To cultivate passion simply means that we give our time and our attention to that which is that inner propulsion, that creativity that is in us. We sort of bypass what the world says we can and cannot do. And we go and we metaphorically sit at the table of passion, and we begin to consume its food. And we begin to have a completely different experience of nourishment, mental, emotional, spiritual, psychological, physical. Because we have given ourselves permission, and every single day we begin to be nourished in a different way, in a renewed way. And here's the funny thing about at least attempting to go and sit at passion's table, that once you've sat there, it's really hard to sit anywhere else. But you know what the other table is? The other table is the table of prevention. I'm going to sit at the table of prevention because I have to micromanage this thing called life, because it's messy, and I have to plan. And I have to compartmentalize, and I have to segment, and I have to coalesce data that is constantly being thrown at me. So I'm going to sit at this table of prevention, and I'm going to think that I'm doing a really good job. And a lot of us sit at the table of prevention. And it's an interesting journey between that particular table and the table of passion. The table of prevention has sort of the party favors and has the Cheetos, and it has really great conversation. But the conversation's really gossip. But it's comfortable, it's familiar, it's sparkly. And it has all of the trappings of what the world tells us is important and vital. This is what you should be doing. And so without even realizing it, we are living in an energy of preventing something from becoming or befalling us. The table of passion tells us that there's nothing that we need to prevent because it is all glory, all God, and that this thing called life is eternal. So if I'm trying to prevent death or halt death by coming too soon, then I've actually given myself to the belief that death is a reality. When in actuality, I'm going to have a journey in this particular incarnation. And the moment that this incarnation is complete, that journey is going to continue. So this is really like a chapter in a never-ending book. And I'm writing the chapter as I'm living it. I'm authoring the chapter day by day, every single time. And so sometimes what we accept is that I can't really go and sit at passion's table until I complete and fix all of my flaws. So I got to fix all of the flaws first because I got to be perfect before I can attempt to embody this passion. And let me tell you, that's one of the biggest misnomers of life. If you didn't see it, you must go to PBS and you must watch the documentary on the making of the musical Hamilton. It is one of the best things ever. And so it's running on PBS, and you can go and you can look at the times and you can watch this. But it's one of the most fascinating things. And the musical is a work of genius because it's brought back to life the stories of the founding fathers, particularly focused on Alexander Hamilton. And what you come to realize in all of this is that these particular men were incredibly flawed human beings. Oh my God, were they flawed. But what do we tend to do with history? We tend to deify people, don't we? We tend to think that they are so masterful and so above and beyond that they've been sitting at passion's table for so long that they've got it all worked together. But what I loved in the documentary and what one of the cast members in the musical was saying, and he says, you know, Jefferson, oh my God. I won't use the word that he used to describe Jefferson, but he was a huge, flawed being. Now this is, you want to talk about paradox? Here's a man who composed the Constitution. And in the Constitution, it says that we believe that all men are created equal. And this man was so against the freeing of slaves. He was not an abolitionist, and he was for that. How could you be any more diametrically opposed? And you go, what goes on in the mind? And so it teaches us. It goes back to that opening statement. Everything that you think you know is not what you know. Because you see, the purity of passion within the mind of this guy named Jefferson had the wherewithal to tap into a work of genius. Even though in his day-to-day breathing and in his day-to-day beliefs, he was very flawed. What does that say about you and I? It says that we are walking, breathing pieces of paradox, right? Because you all have your moments of constitutional beauty. And boy, you have your other moments, right? And here's the thing. It's not enough to go, that's who I am. I'm a walking, breathing paradox. Love it. What we are working at is this word alignment. Imagine what would happen if you accepted the passion's table food, the nourishment, the genius, the creativity that is begging to be used by you, to be individualized through you. Imagine what would happen if we ate more at that table. So that this part of us, this flawed part of us, would start to lose interest. Because you see, we are so consumed by the drama. Drama is fascinating. Drama makes good journalism. Drama makes great news. But that which is the brilliance and the passion is beckoning us to bring our attention and our time and our focus and our values and our commitment more towards that. And that's when then this paradox becomes seemingly less. And we become more of the brilliance of what it is that we are a part of. And that's where that thing that what we don't know then has the ability to come forth. You ever had a moment of inspiration and you go, where did that come from? Usually those moments happen when we're not trying. I love to mow my yard because, man, when I mow my yard, I've already drafted 3 constitutions while I'm mowing. I'm like, oh my God, or when you're showering or whatever it is that you do, or washing your car. It's like all of a sudden, because you're engaged in some physical activity, it's as if you free the brain enough to allow that creativity to come. But when we're sitting there trying, so often we're focused on the fact that we can't do it right and that we're so flawed. And so we are this walking, breathing paradox. And what we are looking for is, how do I stop eating more of the junk food? And how do I begin to nourish myself in such a way that I'm not actually sabotaging all of the genius that I am? Remember W.C. Fields? W.C. Fields was a raging alcoholic. And he used his alcoholism as part of his comedy. And one of the funniest things he ever said was, always carry a flagon of whiskey in case of snake bite. And furthermore, always carry a small snake. So it's justification to keep drinking, right? And you know, there's so much, it's funny, but there's so much symbology in the idea of carrying around a small snake. Because the small snake is the qualifier. You know, it's the thing it's our out. I don't have to be great. I don't have to work on my flaws because I got my little snake here. And my little snake here is going to, you know, keep me in check. And so the small snake becomes the saboteur. And I think it's important that we actually have an interest in understanding our sabotage. Because when we can understand our sabotage, then we can begin the migration over to the table of passion without second-guessing ourselves all the time. What do I mean by understanding our sabotage? We know that we have a self-imposed ceiling of what we think we're capable of. We have this idea that says this is about as far as my talent, my demeanor, my worth is going to take me. And usually what we do is very cyclical. Because what we will do is we will reach the ceiling of what we think that we're available or capable of. And then we will sabotage something so that we don't have to go above that. We bring in the little snake. And the little snake comes in and bites us and says, who do you think you are? And so then we're knocked back down. And then we have to start that process all over again until we hit the same ceiling. And then boom, the cycle happens all over again. And that's why so often we catch ourselves saying, why does this always happen to me? Because we don't really understand our saboteur. We don't really understand that what's happening is something that we have divinely designed, which is in harmony with the way in which we believe. And it isn't until it happens enough that we get sick and tired of it that we go, wait a minute. What is this ceiling? What is this thing? What is this repetitive pattern? What is this snake that continually seems to bite me every time I just get so far? And the beauty is that when I get to that point, if I can go, all right, I want to understand this. And we begin to then stop finger pointing at the world of effect or anybody else out there, and we begin to turn inward. And we begin to look at, what is it that I don't know that I actually know? What is it that I have not given myself permission or the stillness long enough for me to be able to gain clarity about the wisdom that is inherent within me? One of my first teachers, his name was Alberto Villoldo, and he was a Cuban anthropologist. And some of you have heard me tell this story before, but He was wanting to sit at Passion's table. And part of that for him was he wanted to continue to go to Peru so that he could endear himself into the healing practices of the Andean priest. And they didn't want to have anything to do with them. And he kept showing up. He had this great tenacity. He kept showing up. And so finally they permitted him to hang with him and do part of the rituals with him. And one thing he began to notice was every time they would enter into the terrain of the Amazon, into the jungle, when he was with them, all of the noises would go silent. All of the birds would cease to make noise. All of the rustling and the noises that you would expect from the jungle, they ceased. And he thought, how odd. And he noticed one time when he hung back that when these particular Andean priests moved into an arena, that all of those noises were there, and the moment that he caught up to them, they stopped. And he asked them one time, why is this so? And they didn't give him an answer. So he felt, well, I'll figure this out on my own. And he said, it's my deodorant. It's my hair mousse. And so he bathed all of this off, and the next time the same thing happened, silence. And he thought, maybe my geneticism, maybe my smell is repelling them. And so they did a ceremony and they slit a snake. It's snake day here at SLCA. They slit a snake and he lathered all the snake guts all over him. But the only thing that caused was mosquitoes to attack him ferociously. And so finally he begged the priest. He said, please tell me, what is this that I'm observing? And they said, all noise ceases because the kingdom within the jungle recognizes that you believe that you've been kicked out of the garden. You continue to believe that you've been kicked out of the garden. What is that reference? In Genesis, Adam and Eve, the allegory of that story is they are kicked out of the garden, meaning that they are shamed beings. They are born of sin. They are all of these things that separate them from the deification or the definition of what they call God. We feel separate. We feel fundamentally flawed. And it wasn't until you are to rectify that or to work on the subjective psyche of that says, no, that's not who I am. Who I am is a person who gets to sit at the table of passion. Until I can rectify that and own that, then everything that is in harmony with that will cease. And so he went through many, many, many attempts at trying to excavate and uncover what it was inside of him. What it was that was living in the energy of prevention. Until eventually, years later, he was able to be with them in ritual and with ceremony and to have all of that jungle noise there. And you see, so often, without recognizing it, without being able to name our sabotage, the sabotage is simply that you and I still fundamentally believe that we've been kicked out of the garden. You know, I'm basically worthless till proven valuable, instead of the other way around. You are worthy regardless of whatever evidence you present, because nothing changes that value. The comedian Jim Carrey got a lot of attention about a year and a half ago because he did a commencement speech, and the commencement speech went viral. And there was a section in it that was just remarkable. He said, you can spend your whole life imagining ghosts, worrying about the pathway to the future, but all there will ever be is what's happening here. And the decisions we make in this moment, which are based either on love or fear. So many of us choose our path out of fear, disguised as practicality. Loved that. So many of us choose our path out of fear, disguised as practicality. Doesn't that just speak volumes about sitting at the table of prevention? We think we're being practical. Oh, get real. You know that, oh, get real. That's a small r, real. Over here it's, oh, get real. And that's capital R reality. He says, so many of us choose that path. What we really want seems impossibly out of reach and ridiculous to expect. So we never even dare to ask the universe for it. I got to pause here. Yesterday at Joe Walker's memorial, I revealed a little private piece of mine and Joe's relationship. And I know he wouldn't mind me now sharing it with you, but for a very long time, we had a commitment that we would meet once a month at Roasters on Lenox Avenue. And if you knew Joe, you knew that him asking for accountability was a really big deal. And so I was his accountability partner. And we were looking at all of the things that at that phase of his life, what did he want? What did he truly want? Not from prevention, but from passion. And I'll never forget, because Joe was the person who always gave to everybody. Generous Joe, generous Joe, generous Joe, generous Joe. Wherever there was a need, Joe gave. But the other part of Joe that you didn't know was he was unable to receive. And so it was very, very hard for him. And I said an agreement with him, and I said, you know, Joe, if we're going to do this, I'm buying lunch. No. I know what you make. You're not buying lunch. I said, no, I'm buying lunch. You know, because one of the things that he wanted was he wanted to love again. And you know what's funny about wanting to love again? Is that you have to be equal in terms of your giving and your receiving. Because a relationship is reciprocal. And so as we were sitting there, you know, and he ordered the quarter chicken, and I said, you want the half chicken, go ahead and order the half chicken. But what made me laugh was we were there, and Roasters, they give you these little containers of margarine. And he was like complaining about the margarine. And I said, well, you know, Joe, they have real butter here. You just have to ask. And he went, what? I've been coming here all these years and they have real butter? I said, yeah. You've been showing up day after day eating margarine, and there's real butter. There's real butter. Jim Carrey said, what we really want seems impossibly out of reach and ridiculous to expect, so we never dare to ask the universe for it. And he went on to relate the story of his father, who he said, if you ever heard him talk about his dad, he said his father was a zillion times more funny than he was. That his father was one of the greatest comedians that the world never knew. And he said, but instead, my father lost his safe job as an accountant, meaning that his father had always, you know, practicality, be an accountant, and he ended up losing his job as an accountant. And so he said, I learned many great lessons from my father, not the least of which was that you can fail at what you don't want. So you might as well take a chance on doing what it is that you love. You might as well ask for the butter. You might as well take a chance. And here's the thing. Why are we sitting at the table of prevention to begin with? What are you ultimately trying to prevent? Death. You are trying to stall time. And isn't that the most insane thing? Because what do you understand about that? That death is a human design, a human definition. We think it's some big cataclysmic thing. It's actually a part of life. It is the continuance. Again, it's the chapter in an unending book. But prevention, you see, is about trying to postpone the mystery of that because we have not reconciled our fear with it. And that alone is the thing that will keep us glued to the table of prevention rather than risking and asking the universe for what we want. And so when we look at that, we feel sometimes that we are being tested. Any of you ever used that idea? That's happening. God is testing me. I'm like a modern day Job. Let me tell you a little something about the book of Job. You realize that all of these stories, they're stories about the human psyche. They're not stories about a deity outside that is doing something to someone. So then, if you can consider that, then what is the story of Job all about? It's about his own mental demon process with regards to his own value about moving from prevention to passion. And so how does he have to do it? He has to have everything stripped away. Do you need to have everything stripped away for you to finally get that you are worthy? Or can you just simply go, I'm going to get up and go sit over here? Right? And so our founder, Ernest Holmes, even wrote, the notion that we are being tested is nonsense. There is nothing in the universe that limits us or that could desire to limit us. The idea that God is trying our souls to see whether or not we can take it, can you imagine? It's like, I'll give you this, I'll give you this. Can you take that? I don't want to serve Muhammad Ali. I mean, come on. That's born of ignorance. It's born of superstition in the night time of the soul, and it has nothing to do with spiritual realization. There is no power in the universe that tries and tempts us but our own ignorance. The universe withholds nothing from us, because in doing so, it would be withholding from itself, and it cannot do that because that is not the design or the perfect patterning. And so we all use that sometimes as an excuse. I'm being tested. What is this being tested? It's really not understanding that you and I have a saboteur that wants to keep us in our place. When I lived in Los Angeles, there maybe, I don't know, 150 miles or so was Bakersfield, California. And all in that region, they have grapes, and then they turn the grapes into raisins. It's where all the raisin manufacturings are. And so there was a joke about the people in Bakersfield, you know, don't leave Bakersfield. Don't go getting past your raisin. Meaning, have you ever seen people who are trepidatious about accumulating or surpassing their parents? Who do you think you are to get beyond your raisin? Who do you think you are? And so even without sitting and drafting out that and speaking that out, subliminally we're thinking we only can go so far. I can only go so far as my family. I can only go so far as what I've accepted or been dictated that my people or my region or my sect or my class can do. And so without understanding that I've accepted that, that's my snake, that's my saboteur, then every time that I get somewhere, it's not that people or organizations or circumstances are holding me back. It's that I haven't been able to reconcile the fact that I get to bust that ceiling. That's a part of the personal responsibility that doesn't feel so good sometimes. Ernest Holmes wrote, I do not believe that anyone can be happy unless they believe in the continuity of their own experience. In other words, if I'm living in prevention because I'm afraid of death, then I will never be happy. I will never really fully taste the food or the fruits of that table of passion, because I will always try to be keeping something at bay. He says, I have come to believe that it is impossible for human beings to be contented in this life unless they feel sure of the next one. And if you sit here, you'll be called names. If you sit at the table of passion, get used to it. You'll be called impetuous. You will be called impractical. They will go, our snacks are better than yours. Sometimes you'll feel very alone. And those pockets of aloneness are temporary, trust me, because sometimes the vacuum has to be created in order for it to be filled by the quality of what it is that you're really, truly desiring. And see, what you're truly desiring cannot come until that vacuum is created. And it's in that moment, that sort of limbo, that it can be very uncomfortable, and we can feel as though we're crazy or we've made a mistake. And if we're not careful, we'll acquiesce and we'll go back to the table of practicality and prevention. But hear me. What was our theme? We're to encourage our community members to live courageous, fearless lives and to be passionate about its possibility. That doesn't mean anything unless we take it home. We take it into the privacy of our own world. And we truly begin to understand that what we know is nothing compared to what we know inside. And so the things that hold us back, self-hatred, self-loathing, the acceptance of some marginalization, the polarity of that obviously is self-compassion. And to truly understand that we've all been doing what we know to do at the level of our knowing, and now you're hearing, again, that your knowing is better. Your capacity for expansion is unlimited. And so the migration from self-hatred to self-compassion is a decision and a phone call away. And then the other one is comfort. Some people I just want to be comfortable. I just want to create a life that's comfortable. I don't want any surprises. I don't want any challenges. I just want to be comfortable. You were not designed to be comfortable. Tell that to the caterpillar. But I don't want to come out. And so what is the polarity of comfort is cutting edge. And let me tell you, there's a word that we use that actually is a non-word, and that word is risk. Because what's the definition of risk? That something might not work out. In other words, that you and I might make a mistake. Risk-taking is an invalid term because it implies mistake, and there is no mistake in decision-making. There's only a decision. So you can let that word go. So comfort then asks us to be in cutting-edge sensibility and to expand ourselves. The other word, rigidity. Rigidity. I'm going to be so self-righteous in my indignation that I'm going to stand here and I'm not going to move or I'm not going to budge because I would rather be right than happy. I would rather argue for my limitations than to have my limitations taken away from me. That's rigidity. And the opposite of that, obviously, is fluidity. And to be able to realize and to know that regardless of the trends or the tides or whatever happens in our world, that everything that we'll need will be presented to us in the right and perfect timing. And lastly, as Jim Carrey pointed out, is fear. Fear is usually at the root of everything that holds us back from our passion. And obviously, the polarity of fear is love. That love has to start with self. That love has to be uncovered. It has to be accepted. It has to be explored. Because it is the part of the table of passion. It is what you and I are designed for. What if I told you that everything that you think you know, it's not what you know? What you know. Your knowing is so far better. Your capability is something that is indefinable. And now it rests in your acceptance and in your hands. And so it is. Hi, I'm David Ault, and I simply want to say thanks. Thanks for taking the time to watch our broadcast here at Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta. We have a vision, and that vision is to reawaken all to their spiritual magnificence. And one of the ways that we are able to do that is through this very medium of broadcasting. So if you got anything out of this, if you felt in any way inspired, or if something spoke to you directly, then I extend an invitation to you to become a part of our family by donating. And there are many ways in order for you to be able to do that. One is to simply go to our website at slca.com, and there you will find all different kinds of prompts that will help you support what it is that we are doing here in Atlanta. One way is to become a pledger. That means that you decide on a monthly basis that you are going to help us with this vision. Another way is to donate through our management system called Fellowship One, another through PayPal, and another even easier way is on your cell phone. You can do what's called text to tithe, and that number is 404-796-7030. Again, thank you so much for your support, and I invite you to come back weekly to see what it is that we're up to. Blessings.